Thank you for the introduction and the opportunity to talk to you tonight. A little bit more on my background. Has anybody heard of the exchange Kraken? Yeah. So I helped lead the Series A with Hummingbird Investments, so we made Kraken a thing. Did the extension round in 2016 when they were down to 8 employees in one of the bear markets. 8, 4,500 or something now. So they're a great success story of venture capital and what we're able to do here in the Bitcoin space. Bitcoin Magazine was another one of my investments, and I was on their editorial board early in the life cycle. So anyways, been around in the Bitcoin space for a long time. Before Bitcoin, I had a blog called Run to Gold, and I started that in January of 2008. And in there, I talked about the principles of monetary sovereignty. When we look at monetary sovereignty, these metals, gold and silver, they're not just barbarous relics. They're essential checks and balances in the political machinery. They protect against confiscation through inflation, which is a form of taxation without representation and without due process of law. Additionally, we have other things in our constitutions, like the freedom of speech and of the press. And that's where Bitcoin gets really interesting, because now we've been able to turn data and we've been able to turn speech into something that we're using as money. And we've effectively carved out on this planet digital scarcity, 21 million. And now that we're 16 years into it, what do we see? We see a multi-trillion-dollar market cap, about 1.7 trillion. We have liquidity happening globally, 24/7, 365, billions of dollars a day. And most importantly, in my opinion, with this liquidity and with this pure proof of work, we have the highest stock-to-flow asset of any major asset on the planet. Gold is about 55, and we have over 100 for our Bitcoin stock to flow. What does that mean? It means people are now able to acquire monetary sovereignty, and in so many ways they're able to do it paying a cost much lower than what they would otherwise pay with the next best option, which is gold, that humanity has used for millennia. And so that's what we're going to talk about, is monetary sovereignty. To kind of start with this, about 10 years ago, I gave a talk at an event in New York City. Andreas Antonopoulos, anybody remember that name? So the organizer of the event was running around in a panic because he couldn't find Andreas, and so he asked me if I'd say something. So I got up and gave about a 45-minute presentation on the 7 network effects of Bitcoin that we have kind of listed up here. And it was totally impromptu. And anyways, it became a way that many people in the industry started to view how Bitcoin was growing out, how the stages or the progression of it would happen. Now, when we're talking about network effects, I think eBay is a good example. We have buyers and we have sellers. And that's the first network effect. They bought PayPal. So now you had buyers and sellers, and they used a payment method to connect the two. So with 2 network effects, eBay became the dominant auction platform globally and nearly impossible to displace. With Bitcoin, we have these 7 network effects all taking place at the same time. So speculation. In the very early days of Bitcoin, sub $1 million market cap, there was a lot of blue sky, a lot of promise, a lot of imagination of what could be possible. And some people decided to buy Bitcoin back in those days as a speculation. If there's anything humans are good at, they're good at speculating. They love to chase the rabbit. And so as soon, we've had these ups and downs, these bulls and these bear markets in Bitcoin, ran from 25 cents to $32 in 2011. Crashed down to $1.85 over the next couple of years. Ran back up to $266. crashed back down to $60, ran up to, $1,200, crashed back down to around probably $300, and then 2017 it really started to take off again up to 20,000, and you guys know the rest of the story now. Well, those 12, 14, 15, 16 years, they were difficult building the industry. Why? We're clawing out this monetary sovereignty with a new monetary asset that the planet hasn't seen before. It's just crawling out of the primordial ooze. It's been innovated. And so, what types of challenges did we run into? Well, there's obviously the capital challenge. Where do you get the money to build out all these industries and do these things? Then there's the regulatory challenges. We're starting to come out now about Operation Choke Point 2.0, but these were very real challenges in the early days of Bitcoin. But through all of that, we saw these network effects start to take place. Speculation. Within there, you need to be able to secure your digital assets. Everybody now knows about a seed phrase, and that's how you keep your private keys safe, right? So that you don't have to keep your Bitcoins on the exchange. Well, when the Bitcoin software was originally developed, it would just generate 100 private keys at random. One of the companies I funded, we innovated what are called hierarchical deterministic wallets. That's where you're able to have the seed and you can derive an unlimited number of private keys from the seed. From these hierarchical deterministic wallets, we then created the seed phrases. So that made it easy for people to now back up their private keys, which made it easier to engage in speculation on the asset. So there are these use cases that need to be built out. And who's going to build them? We need to find entrepreneurs that are going to do something about it. We need to develop the human capital to do the math and turn it into software code. Then we didn't necessarily want these private keys on a computer that were connected to an internet. So we innovated a whole cold storage solution. And then a little bit later, we get companies like Ledger, and you get hardware wallets, and you get all of this infrastructure that enables you, if you want, to claim your monetary sovereignty. And isn't that the thing about Bitcoin and freedom in general? We have to be willing to claim it. Even if it's there, if we don't claim it and we don't flex our muscles with it and we get lazy about it, we're going to start to lose it. So we have speculation. Well, after the custody piece, you need somewhere to trade it. And that's where the exchanges come in, like Kraken and Coinbase and Bitfinex, and now there's tons of exchanges. Now we've got two other network effects that start happening. Because people are speculating on it, merchants might start to accept Bitcoin in terms of payment. And once merchants are accepting it, then consumers might go and acquire Bitcoin for the express purpose to pay a merchant for the good. So these are two more interrelated network effects that begin to take root. Because we have these three network effects taking place, the block reward, which is denominated in Bitcoin, starts having more value in terms of other assets, dollars, euros, or whatever. And that incentivizes miners to get into the game. We used to be able to mine on a laptop like this. Now we have multi-billion-dollar, publicly traded Bitcoin mining companies that are mining on application-specific integrated circuits with huge facilities pulling down tons of power to mine Bitcoin. That makes the Bitcoin network so much more secure in terms of that proof of work and the risk of a reorganization or other type of attack. Then we've got the fifth network effect of developers. Now the developers are going to want to build on the more solid or the more secure or the more safe blockchain. And I would put not just software developers, but we've got all different types of code. Legal code, regulatory code, software code. These are all different types of development that needs to happen on there. Auditors, accountants, financial statements. So that's our fifth network effect, which leads us to where we're pretty much at now, which is financialization. Financialization is where we really start integrating with the global monetary system. So what are examples of financialization? Well, we have the ETFs. We first started with these ETFs based on futures. Now we have ETFs that are based on spot. But there's no in-kind redemption. And so recently, now that the ETFs have been around for a year, they're pushing for in-kind redemption on these ETFs. We also have 2x levered ETFs on Bitcoin. We have recently in the United States, SAB 121, which prohibited the banks from custodying crypto assets, got repealed. So now the banks are going to be able to get into the game and start custodying crypto assets. So this is all part of financialization. And on our way towards world reserve currency status. Now what is that? That's where Bitcoin starts being used as a world reserve settlement currency like gold, as a final means of payment, as Alan Greenspan says. Why is it a final means? Well, when you're paying people with dollars or with euros, those are IOU nothings. They used to be IOUs for gold, but Nixon closed the gold window in 1971, and now they're just free-floating and they're IOU nothings. And so when you have a dollar or you have a euro or whatever, to really get something with substantive value, you have to be able to pass that little paper coupon on to somebody else in exchange for something, like a pizza or whatever. So gold has played this role and still plays a role in the global financial system as this final means of payment, and it's largely used by central banks to settle and get transferred around. But there's a problem with gold. Clear back in 2005, 2006, I honed in on GATA's beacon. GATA is the Gold Antitrust Action Committee. They started around 1997, two guys, Chris Powell and Bill Murphy. And what they had kind of discovered is that, in essence, the Western central banks, as Alan Greenspan testified twice before Congress, they lease gold in increasing quantities should the price rise. Through further investigation of what's going on, they found that the Western central banks, they carry gold in the vault and gold out on loan is the same line item. In effect, they're reporting cash and accounts receivable as the same thing. Now, why are they doing this? Well, it's very odd behavior. If you own a lot of something, why run a cartel to suppress the price? Because that's going to be the effect if you're leasing it out in increasing quantities if the price rises. You want to suppress the price. But if you own a lot of something, why run a cartel to suppress the price? Well, it's because their power to issue what we use as currency is infinitely more valuable than the price of the portfolio asset of the gold. So they want to be able to engage in this seigniorage. They want to have control over our transactions. And that's why they're leasing gold and suppressing the price of it. Now, Bill Murphy didn't quite understand how serious of an issue this was, and he went on MSNBC and started talking about it in 1997. He talked about it once. He used to play pro football, and he told me this story at dinner once. So after he had been on NBC and he came back home and he was jogging through the park, there were some goons there. And they told him, you better stop talking about this gold price suppression scheme. And they got out a sock with some rolls of coins in it and broke his jaw. So now we've got censorship and intimidation happening when we start talking about the money. And why is that? Because it's so vitally important as a check and balance in our political machinery, in our freedom, and in our individual liberty. And that's because gold is scarce, it's durable, it's scalable, it's also private. Now, an example of the privacy of this gold I was in Singapore meeting with someone who ran a business where they vault gold and silver for retail investors. And one of the Singaporean governmental entity, they wanted to encourage the gold and silver industry to be developed in Singapore. And one part of that was, well, the Russians had sent somebody in 2004 to the GATA conference, and they realized that the Achilles heel of the Western financial system was standing for physical delivery of the gold. And so they started, them along with the Chinese, started buying all the gold and taking possession of it. Now, one of the issues with it is that these LBMA good bars, the London Bullion Market Association good bars, they're stamped with a serial number. Well, you know, if they pay cash on the barrelhead for the gold bars, they want to make sure that nobody has a potential claim on the gold bar. So they wanted to melt down the gold bars and recast them before they ship them to Moscow and to Beijing. Well, there's only about 4,500 tons of annual refining capacity, and all these bars are being sucked out of Switzerland and London and melted down, and they're running at full capacity. And so they want Singapore, you know, Singapore's like, sees this as a market opportunity, we can add more gold refining capacity. And so they went, in 6 months, they went from making the decision to add more refining capacity to having an operational refiner, and I think they doubled the annual capacity of the gold smelting ability. So now they're able to drain the Western central banks of all their physical gold, melt it down, recast it into 1 kilogram bars, and ship it to China. And so gold served a very useful purpose there with privacy, because all that previous transaction history was able to be melted down and gone. And so when we look at Bitcoin and we look at our network effects with Bitcoin, we've got the scarcity, and we've got a higher stock to flow than gold, which really helps us with our speculation network effect, our financialization network effect, our world reserve currency network effect. So Bitcoin's success in that area, very good. Durability, well, we got the miners, and we got tens of millions of dollars of mining rewards that are issued every day. And with all of the, how would I put it, with all of the reliance on different legal documents and things like this, the risk of a reorganization attack on the Bitcoin network is very low. So I would say that for that durability, that's very good also. We're not going to lose our miners. Like, we have a huge industry there. They're making a lot of money. That gives such a great amount of durability to the blockchain. Scalability, we have Merkle trees, we have full nodes. And we have layer 2, like Lightning Network or Liquid or other things. So this is okay, but we don't really get the type of scalability gains that we need to scale this as a daily currency used by ordinary people for ordinary transactions. Merchants and consumers. You know, that's something that we probably need to be able to work on and develop as a better product. Because at the end of the day, gold, Bitcoin, silver, Federal Reserve notes, they're just products, just like any other product. You know, just like you have Pepsi or Coca-Cola or you have eggs, like, they're just products. And so the products that serve the market the best will most likely begin to get rewarded by the market. And what I mean by the best is, well, you obviously want to acquire the most amount of something for the lowest amount of cost. And that thing that you're trying to accomplish, that's subjectively valued by each individual. So it might be monetary sovereignty, it might be the ability to pay for an airplane ticket, like whatever it is. And then privacy. Bitcoin's not very good at privacy. We have Taproot, which has been, you know, a helpful improvement, but at the end of the day, we still have a public blockchain that everybody has a copy of, and we have all the inputs and all the outputs, and we have all the amounts of the Bitcoins down to the very last Satoshi being transferred. And there's entire industry now built on tracking that and mapping it and analyzing it and everything. And big companies like Chainalysis or whatnot. So, you know, it doesn't necessarily provide a very good solution for monetary sovereignty as being private. And so then, if your use case, for example, is something like WikiLeaks, it might not be the tool for you. And so when we're flexing our monetary sovereignty muscles, here are a few things that we can do. We can execute on-chain transactions. That means that we're actually sending and receiving the transactions on the blockchain. We don't necessarily hold the Bitcoin in an ETF, for example. We get it from the exchange, withdraw it to our own wallet. We hold our own private keys. That's the number that enables us to do the math problem that the network will see as valid to then confirm the transaction. So if we want to actually be able to send and receive Bitcoins around, we have to be able to control those private keys. And I think that's an essential part of our monetary sovereignty and flexing it. Next, we need to be able to run a full node. Well, run a node in general, but ideally running a full node. And by that, you're running the software on your own computer that's validating all of the transactions and validating this blockchain to make sure that it's in harmony with the rules that you want it to have, like the 21 million, for example. And so to help us flex that monetary sovereignty, I had created an event for the industry. And so January 3rd, we do proof of keys, where we withdraw all of our Bitcoin from any third-party service to our own private keys while running our own full node. And that helps us flex our monetary sovereignty. If we don't flex it, we're going to get weak and we're not going to know how to use it. And to do that and to feel comfortable doing that, you know, you're going to want to put in effort and education and experience of learning how to use the different tools that are out there, whether it's software, hardware wallets, or things like that. So anyways, there's the presentation on monetary sovereignty. And so do we have any questions?